Okay, today I am here with Vi La Bianca. Thank you for joining me.
Of
It's
course.
wonderful to have you here.
I'm excited to be
Uh,
here.
so we're going to do something a bit different. We're not going to do your story today. We're going to maybe talk about a few different things. Actually, part of it will be your story because I was very deeply moved by your speech for the Ark Encounter protest.
Hmm.
So I wanted to get into that a little bit. But first,
Certainly.
there was a tweet of yours this week that really set my mind going because of the way my mind works. Uh, what if we get to heaven and God is a cake? And immediately my thoughts sprang to the Joan Osborne song. I don't know if you remember. What if God was one of us?
Oh gosh.
And and of course the Weird Al Yankovic parody of that, which is what if God smoked cannabis? So I came up with one, and at risk of losing any subscribers I have, um, I've got what if God were chocolate cake or chocolate fudge for goodness sake? Eat a lot and gain no weight. Take a bucket load home. I promise I won't sing after. I
I
won't
love
sing
it.
again. So,
Oh
can I
my
ask
gosh.
what prompted your tweet and how did it blow up?
Oh gosh. Well, yeah. So there's this thing, and I realized that that might be like just a funny tweet by itself, but there's actually a sub conversation that has been happening on Twitter for like the last couple of days, and because I'm on Twitter constantly, I'm aware of these like side conversations and trends happening. So there's this a couple of videos coming out of people cutting into things that shouldn't be cake, and then it's cake. So they'll cut into like a hand and you'll be like, oh my goodness, but then it's cake. Or like they'll be editing a document and then they put the pen aside and cut the document up into slices of cake. So there's this ongoing conversation about, am I a cake? Is my boyfriend a cake? Like, how do we know what isn't cake anymore? So I kind of just took that and was like, what if we got to heaven and God was just cake?
And what actually blew up? What happened when you after you did it?
Oh, people jumped on that very quickly, which was fun. I like it when tweets have a lot of engagement in the comments and like actually like get conversations going. And there were some people who were arguing about the kind of cake that God would be, and there of course were other people who were saying, "I like pie. God should be pie." Um, and then, of course, there were the requisite Eddie Izzard comments about cake or death. So that made me very happy.
Did you get any theists actually complaining about it?
I think they probably caught on that that one was humorous. Pretty sure.
Would
This
it be a
atheist
more?
does believe in God. They just think that God is cake. It all makes
Yes,
sense now. Yes.
that was brilliant. It just made me laugh so much. Every now and again, you just come across a tweet that you just go, yeah, that's great. And yeah, I've got a bit of a quirky sense of humour, as anybody who listens to me knows. And yeah, that would set me off.
I'm glad.
We do need to go a little bit more serious with this next one, though, because as I mentioned, your speech for the Ark Encounter
Yes.
protest, I I'm I've worked in education for a number of years. I do a lot of distance education at the moment
Hmm.
because of COVID, Zoom lessons and pre-recorded videos and things like that. But I've always taught, and for many many years, and I really care deeply about education. I think education is possibly the most important thing that we actually have.
Hmm.
It's the only thing that can ensure the future of our species and civilization and yeah life on the planet and so on. Uh, so it grieves me when I hear somebody saying that they were miseducated in the way
Hmm.
that you were.
Right.
And yeah, I wonder if we could have a bit of a discussion about that. Firstly, briefly, if you could just describe, what your education was actually like at home.
Sure. Yeah. So I prefer the term miseducation to uneducated, right? Someone can have been educated with the wrong information. And it puts a little bit more of a, oh, well, you're not uneducated. It wasn't like you didn't try. It wasn't like nobody was giving you information and you were kind of raised in a bubble. It was information. It was just the wrong information. So I was raised in a homeschooled Christian environment. I was the oldest of six children, out in the middle of nowhere, super conservative, creationist, whole nine. And I was educated to support that worldview. I was educated to think about the world as being created in 6 days by a God, only 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. The Garden of Eden, of course, Noah's Ark, all of the stories in the Bible were true and historically accurate and scientifically accurate. I learned that, and then that was a particular narrative that spanned through Revelation, which was Armageddon and the end of the world and the apocalypse and God's judgment, and all of that was happening in my lifetime. I was told. I didn't think I was going to get to go to college. I was like, I would pray at night. I'd be like, God, please, I know that the world is horrible and you want to burn everything, but please just wait until I have like 1 year of college, because I really, really want to experience college. So yeah, it was a very particular worldview that only after I got out did I realize was actually extremely harmful and the root cause of a lot of the things that I suffer with and battle with to this day.
Yeah. So Young Earth obviously was a big part of that. Literal Bible. Rapture in your lifetime. I've heard people talk about this. Aaron Ra was talking once about some neighbours of his that wouldn't even fix their fence because they thought there was no point in fixing the fence because the rapture was happening anytime soon.
What a beautiful representation of where America is right now. The U.S., like, I'm not even going to fix the fence because it's all going to be over soon. It's actually terrifying to have people in government who honestly believe that, you know, the rapture is going to happen at any point, because clearly they're not going to care about things like the environment or equity or any of these things, because, you know, who cares? It's all going to go up in flames in a couple hundred years.
Did you ever watch the Bill Maher film, Religious?
Oh, yes. Oh, that was a very specific point in my life where I was no longer a Christian, but I was still, like, I was SBNR, right? Like spiritual, but not religious. And I was looking for things to give me a direction, right? Because I was in this middle ground space of, I know what I don't believe anymore, but I don't know what I do think. And Religious was one of the very first exposures that I had to how people from the outside saw what I had grown up in. And it was very jarring. It was hysterical, but even more than that, it was just this like dunk in cold water, like, oh, this is how I came across to other people in my life. And that's shocking.
Yeah. The scene that always sticks with me from it was the one where he's talking to the politician. I can't remember whether a congressman or a senator or something. And he asks him the question, if you think that this is just, you know, a prequel to eternity, you know, why do you feel the need to make lives better for people here? And the guy was just stumped. No answer whatsoever.
Yeah. It is an ongoing problem.
Yeah, to me, they've got it completely the wrong way around. I was watching the comments of Will Smith the other day, and I was just,
oh goodness, yeah, that was rough.
It was a real facepalm moment. To me, you know, even if you're religious, you ought to be voting for atheists because they want to make this world better.
Right. Wouldn't you think, like, okay, well, let's vote for the people who think that we're on a time limit and this is all we have, and that there's no one coming to save us, because they're the ones who are going to get stuff done. So even if we're wrong, like, we are the ones who are going to, you know, get off our butts and do stuff.
Yeah. I did have a couple of observations, actually. You mentioned Noah's flood. And I'm making an argument just for anybody who's not, because you can't see me, I'm making air quotes. I'm making an argument for Noah's flood here. I would say that the whole Noah story would explain two things. It would explain why the Middle East is a desert, because he cut down the sort of rainforest in order to build the ark. And the other thing is, it would explain why we don't know what gopher wood is, because he made that species go extinct.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you know, like, you can find justification for just about anything. And honestly, those are not I know that you are being humorous in your supposition, but they are not far off from like actual arguments that I've heard for it, right? Like they are that level of ridiculous.
Yeah, and I was trying to be ridiculous, and that's the thing. The other thing that you mentioned in your Ark Encounter protest was about your home, the way that your home was run, father as head of the household. And
right.
If you got my talking points there, you've got the umbrellas, which was the Bill Gothard.
I hate the umbrellas so much.
The Bill Gothard thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's Bill Gothard who used to go around doing these speeches, and we won't get into his character, but anybody who wants to learn more about Bill Gothard should listen to the Mindshift podcast with Clint Haycock.
Yes.
He talks a lot about Bill Gothard. What was this like with the umbrellas?
Yeah, well, it was, I can imagine, I didn't have access to this particular graphic while I was growing up, but it perfectly represents what we assumed to be the case. It was very much similar to the way I was raised, with God overhead, over everything, and then the father, and then the mother, and then the children under that. And the funny thing that I find with this particular graphic is, so really you only need one umbrella. Like the other umbrellas are not doing anything. Like they're all redundant. So you can pick one and just go off with it. You want to apparently all I need is a wife and then I'm good, right? Because it's how umbrellas work. So for me, it's just grating in that way. But yeah, just the concept of there is someone above the father that the father somehow has access to, that the other members of the family do not, just sets you up for a situation where you cannot question this authority figure, nor can you verify the claims that he is making, since he is the only one in connection with God. So it does set you up to be in a situation where the head of the household, and I'm using air quotes here, uses them to justify any amount of abuse that they feel is necessary or useful to them, because there's another umbrella over me and he's just telling me what to do, man.
Yeah, I think that one diagram encapsulates misogyny and delusion in one diagram, doesn't it, really?
Oh yes, and the uselessness of a God umbrella in the first place.
Yes. The one next to it, the one with the Satan as the head of the household and the wife in charge of the husband. Clint actually hadn't seen that one. When I spoke to Clint about that one, he hadn't seen that diagram, but he thought it was quite funny. Funny in a sense of, a bit sick, but funny.
Yes. Oh my goodness! Yes, the epitome of evil in the world that is so topsy turvy and upside down that it is just absolutely twisted. Women have control over men. How terrifying! It's just like, well, you put right there. You have shown your hand, right? If that is the only argument that you're making in one godly example, the man is the head of the household, and in the satanic example, the woman is the head of the household, and really you've shown your hand, and you've revealed what your true concern is, right? Which is that misogynistic base.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you feel about relationships now, but the way I see my relationship with my wife is it's a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And each of us tends to do the things that we do best within that partnership. So as it happens, things that would be traditionally the male role are the things that she's actually best at. So she tends to look after the finances, and she looks after actually maintaining stuff around the house. She's much better with a screwdriver and a saw than I am. And I tend to do things like the cooking and the cleaning, because I'm a much better cook than she is. So, so we just each do what we're best at. It just seems to me to be the logical way to go. And
right, as long as you are with somebody who compliments you, that is I feel like it's such a weird thing, and I don't want to get into the whole gender discussion because that's the thing I talk about with everybody, and we need to keep this fresh and new and interesting. But the concept that any chore or any skill set is inherently gendered, and then much less has some kind of overhead ethereal edict on top of it, is just, I grew up in that way, and it's so foreign to me now that I cannot wrap my head around it. So,
yeah, I fully understand. The other thing that you mentioned as well was the underrepresentation of atheists in government. We've kind of touched on it a little bit already.
Mm-hmm.
And the persecution in other parts of the world. Just to underpin this, there's an organisation called Open Doors that I've seen quite on the TV quite a bit here in Australia, and they're always going on about how Christians are oppressed in parts of the Middle East and all this sort of stuff, which we know is happening, and obviously I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see anybody oppressed for any reason, really. But they don't mention the fact that non-believers are persecuted just as much in those regions.
Right.
And so, there seems to be these organisations that just fight their own little battles for their own little group. And then you've got somebody like Armin Navabi who fights against all kinds of oppression. He doesn't care who's being oppressed, he just goes and protests it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to talk a little bit to what you said and about what I've just said?
Yeah, I think that there is a way to spin a narrative, and there are certainly people who are using it to promote atheism only and be like, atheists are the only kinds of people that are oppressed and more oppressed than other kinds out there in other parts of the world. And that's not necessarily accurate. In the same way, just Christians are not being oppressed out there in the world. And there is no one group that is perpetrating harm against one other specific group. It is always a majority perpetrating some kind of harm on a minority opinion, and that could be Christian, that can be atheist, that could be it doesn't even just cover religion, right? This is in any circle of society. And so I think for myself as a secular humanist, that is my focus, right? It's not I'm out for the good of atheists only. It's not I'm out for the good of everyone except for Christians. It's I'm out to make sure that I'm doing my part to promote a society where everybody has equal access to the law, to societal benefits, to the ability to speak their mind and worship or not as they please. So, yeah, I think that if you're going to be an honest secular humanist, it's going to have to be a discussion that goes beyond just that atheist-Christian dichotomy.
Yeah, definitely. And we know it's going on. We know, for example, that both Christians and Muslims are persecuted in China, and I've heard of all sorts of abuses that have gone on there. Minority groups in many places seem to get the thin end of the wedge. We've had our problems here in Australia with the Indigenous Australians and the way they've been treated over the years. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we just need to get it sorted out and realise that we're all just people and, try and treat everybody with respect.
Yeah, you'd think it would be simple, right? That's a simple concept, but so difficult to put into practice.
Yeah, it is, but often it's because of, for example, what I see from the United States, and you live there, so you can talk more to this than me, but we see Christians actually claiming that their rights are being infringed when they're not allowed to subjugate other people.
Right, exactly. Well, when subjugation of other people is written into your moral code and into your edicts and your holy book, then yes, that is going to be something that you feel like you have the right to do. And it's much more than just I'm used to feeling like I have the power and I'm upset that I don't anymore. That's certainly a large part of it. But another part of that is I'm actually told to do these things by my God, by my interpretation of this book. So if I can't do those things, you are putting me at risk of being against my own deity. So it is this, I think that's the reason why it's so virulent and so violent right now, is because it's not just I want to continue to be top dog. It's more, I am told that I have to be up here or else I'm failing my God. So I think there's nuance there as well.
Yeah, actually, that leads me right on to the next thing, which was this picture about the young lady standing in front of the US flag with her assault weapon and her Bible, and then underneath you've got the Muslim woman with the assault weapon and the Quran. Is it just me, or is Republican Christianity starting to look a lot like extremist Islam?
Yeah, it's not just starting. Every version of every religion has its fundamentalist, violent, terrorist-oriented faction, right? And that's how that was the Crusades. The Crusades were Christians going into other countries and slaughtering people. So this isn't new. Republican Christianity is not this aberration that we're only just seeing. It's just the rest of the world, or at least parts of the world, are progressing beyond that kind of mindset, and so are able to look at it and say, why is this a thing? Why are we allowing this? Why are people being radicalized like this? But the new thing is being able to look at that and say that's wrong, not the thing itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I've sort of taken on board, and I don't know how you feel about this, was I remember listening to Sam Harris saying that he worries even about people who are moderate believers because he feels that any level of belief can become radicalized, which is why I prefer people to be non-believers. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think my theme here tonight seems to be oversimplification and nuance. I do think it's more nuanced than that. I don't think that just because you disbelieve, you are less likely to be taken in by something or radicalized. I think that certainly if you have an irrational belief that you're holding on to with any level of intensity, whether that's fundamentalist or just kind of a culturally Christian, go to church on Sundays type thing, then that is an in that people can use to radicalize you. Certainly, that is a chink in your armor. But I don't think that the answer is just nobody should believe in anything, because I know people who are atheists who don't believe in a God, who take on all kinds of very strange and out there beliefs because they weren't taught to think rationally. So I think instead of focusing on whether or not you believe in a God, and focusing instead on, are you being rational in your decision making? Are you putting every belief, every claim under that microscope? That should be the focus. And that's not what all non-believers are doing by any means.
Yeah, I get that. For example, things like white nationalism, that's something where you can become an extremist without any sort of God belief. So there are lots of things out there that you can be radicalized in. It's not just religion.
But certainly religion is one area where it's very easy to water that and see it grow into something that isn't great.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay. Republican Matt, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name. Oh, well, I will. Gates?
Yes.
Religious services are essential. No government should stand between an American and their faith. How do you feel about that?
I have very many feelings about this particular subject, just because it ties very much into the whole masks, like should you wear them debate, and the should we social distance debate, and the fact that COVID cases are skyrocketing. I think that today Florida reported 300,000 cases in the state alone. It's intense. I think that this is a ridiculous statement on the face of it. It's like a child throwing a temper tantrum because they were told they can't have any more ice cream. It's that level of just petulant to me. But it's more than that. That is the average person I find to be very petulant when they're talking about these things. For representatives, for people who have access to the CDC, to scientists, to the top people in these fields, to still be using talking points like Matt Gaetz is, I find that to be absolutely horrific and a breach of their oath of office, to put it mildly, because they're not honestly concerned about that. They are making it a wedge issue that they can then rely on people to support them with. So they're talking down to an audience who is eating it up, and that's both the fault of the audience for not being invested enough in investigating and following rationality, and that's the problem on the part of the representatives who are saying, my constituents are so stupid that I can peddle this absolute drivel and expect them to eat it up and have it turn out exactly that way. So I've got many feelings about that, and about Matt Gaetz in particular. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, we had an awful lot of cases reported from church services and things like that. It was 260 from one church the other day.
Mm-hmm. No, churches are one of the main hotspots. It's churches, it's bars, it's beaches. I don't know why we haven't closed the beaches yet. Yeah, it's a problem. And again, it comes down to this magical thinking, right? Where, oh, well, God will protect me. God will intercept the virus. Prayer will. I had this Twitter thread the other week where I was like, okay, I'm honestly curious. Tell me how prayer protects you from COVID. Does it like enter your bloodstream and like fight the virus like physically, or does it create like an actual physical shield around you, like a mask that you don't have to wear? Or like, tell me how this actually works. And nobody could, right? Of course, because nobody gives it that much thought. They say prayer will protect me. Okay, how? Is it gonna negotiate with COVID? Does COVID respect the authority of a particular deity? Like, how exactly is this gonna work? Nobody has an answer, but everyone says it.
Yeah, if you look at the actual statistics now, it's actually showing that those that actually think that prayer protects them are actually the ones that are getting it the most.
It's almost like they're mistaken.
Yeah. Did you see the Florida video where they had the people speaking about the wearing of masks and the...
I did not. Is this going to get me hot under the collar?
Probably. They had a whole string of citizens coming in to give their views on the compulsory wearing of masks.
I have seen bits and pieces of this. Yes. Oh my goodness. My favorite thing was somebody clipped a bunch of reaction shots from town halls from Parks and Rec and squashed them together. So it was these protesters giving their speeches, and then just like Leslie Knope looking absolutely just stunned and disappointed. And I was like, this is the only way I can absorb this information, because otherwise it's too depressing.
Yeah, if they think a mask is going to interfere with God's breathing system, what the hell do they think that COVID's going to do?
Right? Oh my goodness. Also, for an all-powerful God to be stopped by a piece of fabric, like, it's a little wimpy, honestly.
Yeah, there's actually statistics out there that show that wearing of masks actually reduces your symptoms even if you contract the disease, because of course there's something called initial viral load. Mm-hmm. So if you get this happens with all viruses, colds, flus, etc. And I've noticed this year that so here in Western Australia we really are not having COVID. The only cases we've had, no community spread whatsoever. The only cases that we've had are people returning, and we sequester them in a hotel for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. They're not allowed out until if they've got it, they're not allowed out until they're testing negative. Yeah. And and unlike Melbourne, where they've got lots and lots of cases now, we actually did that professionally over here. Our government's been very, very good. And our border is closed to. I had a friend who went to Melbourne a little while ago and had to do 2 weeks when they came back as well. Yeah. Just from just within Australia. So. Oh,
certainly no. I'm in one of the states where other states test to make sure that, like, even moving across states, they're like, you can't come into this state from this state unless you sequester for 14 days, which good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got no community spread here, but we're still observing all the things. So in the supermarket, I don't know if you've got this, we've got the spots on the floor where you stand so that you're distancing. And on the way into the supermarket, they've got sanitizer, they've got wipes to wipe down the trolley before you use it, all this sort of stuff. So, and I've been doing that, and I just found that I've just been less ill generally all year.
Yeah.
And it's not that I haven't had any sort of cold. I have, but it wasn't that bad, and I was still able to go for a run and all this sort of stuff. And it's to do with initial viral load. If you get a lot of virus in one go, it kind of just overwhelms your immune system. Whereas if you only get a small load, by the time it's building up, your immune system's starting to gear up to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So wearing the masks, even if you get it, can actually reduce your chances of getting very, very ill or even dying. It's just a no-brainer. There was a Twitter thread the other day I saw where somebody's mother, who's actually, this is frightening, actually works in health, was saying that wearing a mask will decrease your oxygen level. And the daughter says, okay, puts a mask on, puts the pulse ox on the finger.
Yep.
Let's watch the oxygen levels. No change whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like a mask is going, an O2 molecule is going through that mask like it's not there. It's just
right. Oh my goodness. But yeah, this is the result of a culture where magical thinking is not only tolerated but celebrated, right? This is the result of a culture that venerates belief on the basis of belief alone, and it's detrimental. And this is exactly what this is why people ask, why do you care so much, right? And this is kind of what Noah was talking about during the Ark Encounter protest. If you saw his speech as well, why do you care? We're not going after people because we just don't like that they believe in a God. We understand that if you have a certain level of magical thinking in your worldview, that is going to translate to other areas of your worldview, and then you're going to inevitably affect other people with acting out that worldview. So this is just, honestly, I wish I could say I was surprised by what we're seeing here in the States, but I really am not, unfortunately.
Yes, that's a good point as well. Yeah, of course, it does. In fact, all other areas of the way that you go on. An argument that I thought, again, I didn't think this would be taken seriously, but an argument that I would put forward is that, God gave you the critical thinking faculties to take precautions and keep yourself healthy.
Right.
So why are you ignoring those? Why are you expect? It's like the story, the guy in the flood who
sent the radio signal, sent the boat, sent the helicopter. Yeah.
It's exactly like that. We've sent you masks. We've told you to wear them.
Right. Exactly.
For fuck's sake! What are you doing?
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I love the response to it from Danny. I follow her tweets quite a lot, and I love you. Show me where Jesus said, "Go forth and give thy money to thy mega church," because I'm pretty sure it was more like the opposite. And she's got this thing: when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they will ever get. Matthew 6:5. I thought that was an excellent response to Republican Matt Gaetz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you'd think that for somebody who loves the Bible as much as some of these politicians, that they'd read it enough to integrate some of the more useful pieces of information, but apparently those go right out the window. So
that's absolutely the case, I think. Of course, if they read it, they might become atheists and then they'd be unelectable. Yeah,
you'd have to be very careful about reading the Bible, especially with an eye towards accuracy, because that's one direction that you don't want to go unless you're ready.
Okay, so I actually just put this talking point in today. So you haven't got it on the document I sent you. It's one that I was actually in the folder to speak to you, but I forgot to put it in the document. But I don't know how much of a fan of Ricky Gervais you are. Do you like Ricky?
Yes. He's not my favorite. I'm not like one of those people who consider him one of the primary examples of a good atheist, but he does have some good points.
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of his comedy work. I always watch his shows when he does them, and I don't know if you watched Afterlife. That's been really good.
Bits and pieces, never the whole thing.
Right. Okay. I sort of binge watched the last season when it came out. But there's a quote from him here that says, "You don't see faith healers working in hospitals for the same reason you don't see psychics winning the lottery every week."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like they can't actually do what they say they're going to do.
Almost.
I wouldn't want to make that assumption. That would need more thought, but...
I think another one of his that he said was, what was it? It was about vampires or something. It was. I think it was an answer to Pascal's wager. He doesn't believe in God because something might happen to him after he dies, for the same reason he doesn't put cloves of garlic around his doorways.
Right, exactly. It's like, yes, you could be super extra careful to protect yourself from every supernatural, threat, but why are you picking and choosing like this?
Another one, I don't think this was a Ricky, it might have been those from the sounds of it, that just following up, it just reminded me of another one, was that vampires are scared of crosses because they're allergic to bullshit.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one. I like that a lot.
Just as an aside as well about the cross, it's an instrument of torture, isn't it? The word excruciating comes from the experience of being crucified.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's if you're gonna go full death cult and like own it, but don't pretend it's not a death cult. Because it is. I remember I was talking with a then partner who had been raised atheist, and we were talking about how I grew up and my religious experiences, and I used the phrase, "Oh yes, I believed we were washed in the blood of the Lamb." And he looks at me like I've grown another head. He's like, "That's disgusting. What?" And I thought about it. I was like, oh gosh, that is actually kind of gross. I just said it because that's what I'm used to saying, right? Like that phrase is encoded in my brain because indoctrination. But like thinking about it, and not just that phrase, but other concepts that I grew up thinking were totally normal, actually are quite disturbing if you give them even a millisecond of additional thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I did have a good follow-up question to that, but in the way things get at my age, where I forget everything within seconds. I've come back from the supermarket without the shopping once, and I've forgotten what the follow-up question was. If it pops into my head at some stage while we're talking, I'll bring it up even when it's completely out of place in the conversation. But I love this tweet from you, another one of your ones that just made me laugh. I play competitive Twitter. I check to see if my reply has the most likes of all replies on a thread, and then I celebrate by feeling fleetingly superior. It's got 62 likes at the time that I took the picture of it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a very competitive person. And now you've got me curious about how well it's done since. So I'm going to look for it really quick while I respond to you. But no, I'm a terribly competitive person. And that was mostly just me. Okay, 97 likes at this point. It just makes me happy. Twitter is my outlet. I tend to vent on there quite a bit. But I also I don't know. I was taught to be I have a journalism degree, so the concept of brevity and getting your point across in as few words as possible and all of that was kind of drilled into me. So I found Twitter and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly the way I was taught to communicate. This is great. But yeah, I'm just a super competitive person. Anything that has a number that I can compare with my own, I'm automatically drawn to it.
I think you could get a lot more likes if you just tweeted, "I found Jesus again."
Oh goodness, they'd be like, "Are you okay? Blink twice if you need help." That's actually to me one of the funniest things, and kind of proof in the pudding that atheists are or tend to be moral people or can be moral people. Is do you know how much money I could make or any of my colleagues in the sphere could make if we got super famous for being an atheist and then had a conversion process and then wrote a book about how we became a Christian again? How much money is in that possible like path? Because there was a talk at the last American Atheist Conference. Sadly, we couldn't go to the one this last year because of COVID, but year prior, one of the speakers broke down how much money the different denominations and churches had, and it's mind blowing how much capital is just at the fingertips of these people, which is why they're able to dominate news cycles and politics and all of these things. And meanwhile, we're here like on Patreon being like, hey, give me $5 maybe. It'll be great. So there is this discrepancy. There is a wealth problem between Christians and atheists, at least in the US. And to be able to look at that and still say, no, I'm going to stick with the poor guys because it aligns with my true vision as opposed to defecting and just automatically becoming this fountain of wealth for myself. By itself is kind of like I don't know, a refutation of the fact that atheists are just in it for the fame or the money or the infamy or whatever they say.
Yeah, it's the whole Lee Strobel thing. And you listen to Lee Strobel, how poor his reasons are for becoming a Christian, like there's any evidence that he was ever an atheist.
Right, exactly.
I was listening to one of Jimmy Snow's episodes earlier on today, and they had a guy who phoned up, and this was incredibly clever of Jimmy, absolutely brilliant work. The guy phoned up to give the fine-tuning argument, and Jimmy started by debunking the fine-tuning argument. He had Prophet of Zod on as a co-host, and Prophet of Zod gave one of the best refutations I've actually heard. He said, why would we need this fine-tuning anyway if God could create it anyway? To have this sort of habitable zone on this planet, and we need to breathe oxygen and all that. He's just creating problems for himself that he didn't have to have. He could have created this anyway. Which was really good. But what they managed to do is steer this guy away from this sort of quasi-scientific sort of argument that he'd phoned up to give, and they managed to steer him to what he actually believes. And he actually believes that demons are a real thing and that Satan is a real thing. And how does he know? He thinks that other sects of Christianity are listening to Satan, but only he is listening to God. And you just think, man, just go and listen back to that phone call. It was brilliant the way that Jimmy did it. And he was saying, well, how do you know that? Because he comes out of Mormonism, doesn't he? And he was saying,
right.
He said, I felt that God was talking to me when I was a Mormon. How was I supposed to distinguish that from what you get? And it was absolutely brilliant.
That is a really good tactic to do away with this scientific, like pseudoscience argument that a lot of Christians tend to give for various things. I was talking with somebody about trans issues and just where they stood on that topic. And they were giving me all of these like scientific reasons why they disagreed with it. Well, science says this. And I'm like, does it though? But, when I finally got down to it, I was like, okay, So even if all of the science that you gave to me just now that you think supports your position was disproven, would you change your mind? And they said, no. And I said, why not? And they said, because I don't think God likes it. And that's all you needed to say, right? You don't need to come at me with this fake science to try and convince me on my turf that, my thinking is wrong or that you're correct. Just say what you mean, and then we'll get down to that and have a productive conversation instead of like shooting at random theories that you're just throwing out there to distract from the main topic.
Yeah, I think before we came on, I think we were talking about a Twitter thread that I'd got involved in and ducked out of because it was all this philosophical stuff about, good and evil. And, the theists on there all seem to think that good and evil are actual physical entities that actually exist and things like that. Whereas for somebody, from my perspective, I can't even put myself in their shoes. And I think coming out of faith, you can. People like yourself and Eric can put yourself back in their shoes and think about how they viewed it. But I'm a cradle atheist. Yeah. And so I can't put myself in their shoes at all. I just think what they're saying is completely barking mad. And that we're just people. And I can see how everything is on a continuum.
Yeah.
And, some people are better than others, but that doesn't mean that you don't get good people doing things that aren't good at times, and bad people, even totally evil people, the Stalins and Hitlers and people. Actually, that's reminded me of a point from earlier on. Let me just come back to, so I'll come back to that in a minute. But even people like that were probably capable in parts of their lives of acts of kindness, because we're just people,
exactly,
better than others, and it's on a continuum. And that also brings me to your point about gender. Coming from a maths background, I think that most things are on a continuum, and I can right. I can easily see that gender is just on a continuum, and it may not be equally distributed. We may have peaks in a couple of places. Right, it might be a bimodal type distribution, but I find that very easy to picture.
Yeah, sometimes that is all it takes is being able to picture it because you learned about it somewhere else, right? And that's more than anything kind of what I consider my job to be here on the internet, on Twitter, on YouTube, is to be the reference point that someone saw before, so that when they come across a concept again, it's not as foreign and they can picture it. Because if you can picture it in your head, it becomes a lot more real to you. It becomes a lot more possible, right? And so if it's something you can put a face to, or in your case, if you can put like a graph to or a diagram to, it's a lot easier to say, okay, well, I can map this concept onto this experience and more easily integrate that into my thought patterns. And it really it helps. It does. And I don't know. I just consider that to be my contribution, in addition to talking about God, talking about philosophy, just being somebody who people can see and take with them as they interact with others.
Yeah, I think leading on to that as well is, again, within this same thread, there was people saying about how homosexuality was, wrong and all this sort of stuff. And I just think that sometimes those
fun things are wrong. Fun things are wrong. That's how they go.
I always describe it as that their religion is giving them an empathy bypass. There was a time, obviously, when I was coming into puberty where I just was attracted to girls, and I didn't make a choice. I didn't think to myself, who am I going to be attracted to? And if you can't see that some people might be attracted to the same sex, what is wrong with you? I mean, it's just obvious that some people will.
Yeah, I like the concept of an empathy bypass. It does give people an opportunity to kind of jump straight out of the I'm going to empathize and think about how you think about things and how you're seeing the world, and go straight into no, this is right or this is wrong. And it's that binary again. And I'm gonna rail against the binary for as long as I need to in every area of life, but it's not an either or situation, right? It's not a this is right or wrong. Sometimes it just is. And the thing that, going back to kind of the morality piece that we were talking about, just as strange to me as this Platonic idealist form of like actual objective existing good and evil as concepts, as entities, is the idea that everything is either one or the other. I was having a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and they were convinced that every single action was either moral or immoral. And I was like, so you get up and you walk around your room and you come back to your desk. Was that a moral action or an immoral action? And they were like, well, it depends on what I was thinking while I was walking and what my intention was upon coming back to it. I was like, how do you function thinking that everything is either moral or something's just, it's not applicable, right? Like you go to sleep at night, that's not a moral action. You're just existing. So yeah, it's this concept of good and evil is.
Yeah, I think this brings us around in a circle to the conversation we were having just now with the guy who phoned into Jimmy Snow. In that, quite often these sorts of arguments are what I call obfuscations. They're covering up what it actually is that they believe and why.
Yeah.
And so quite often when people are doing these sort of moral and, objective, an observation of mine is that often when people use the word objectively, they're objectively talking complete bollocks. but it's an obfuscation. And I quite often just say, okay, how old do you think the Earth is? And do you think demons are a real thing? Rather than getting into this,
right? Exactly.
This whole philosophical
Let's get down to the brass tacks here. And I think a lot of the time they actually don't know that they're obfuscating because they were taught to connect with people who were not believers on this high, like metaphysical argumentation level by apologists, right? That's why apologists exist, is to prepare Christians to talk to non-believers in a way that doesn't make them sound like they're believing in a 2,000-year-old book by Bronze Age goat herders. But no, I think a lot of the time it's not even intentional, and it's not even a thing that they're actively doing. They are obfuscating from themselves, not only because this is something that they have been taught to do, but also deep down, I think they know. And I'm not speaking for everyone here, but as somebody who was raised in this kind of faith, and as somebody who's seen multiple people and helped multiple people out of it, there is that cognitive dissonance, right? There is that sense of, if I look at this straight on, head on, no obfuscation, no excuses, just straight ahead, I'm not going to like what I see, and I'm not going to be able to back it up. And I'm going to have to make a decision to either go with something that I know for a fact is not accurate, or move away from a faith that has given me a lot of comfort and a source of joy and peace. So I think a lot of that obfuscation is just misdirection on the behest of self preservation.
Yeah, it's a good point you make. It actually leads me on to I actually want to get somebody who's really good at philosophy, somebody like Tom Jump, to help me formulate what I call presuppositionalist atheism, which is, everybody knows that the God concept is complete bollocks, but some people are just like frightened of dying, so they pretend that they believe.
Oh, yes. No, that is definitely, honestly, that's one of the only tactics you can take with a precept, just because it's so impossible to meet in any middle ground at all. The only option is to be like, no, actually, I'm right, and you don't believe in God and just think you do. Like, that's it.
Now, I said you reminded me of something. The Crusades, you mentioned about the Crusades earlier on in this conversation. And a point that I've seen made, and I do believe, I think it was actually maybe Thomas Westbrook that made that for the first time. I know he's a good friend of yours. Mm-hmm. It may have been him that I first saw it from, but I've seen it from a number of people now, which is, because quite often they say about how many people Stalin killed or how many people Hitler killed and this sort of stuff.
Right.
Could you imagine what the Crusaders would have done if they'd had modern military logistics and assault weapons?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, this is looking at it one level deeper, right? And going past that obfuscation into, okay, let's look at motivation, let's look at intent. is there any way that the Crusaders or any of the multiple iterations of religion let anything go if they had the ability to get to that kind of technological I don't know what I'm trying to say here, strata, I suppose, is a fancy way of saying. Yeah, I fully agree. I think that it's absolutely ridiculous to assume that just because we were unfortunate enough to have Hitler and Stalin in an era where they could create as much damage as they did, that they are the only ones who wanted to.
Yeah, I think that nailed it. What you said there. Okay, so I've run out of just about all the talking points I sent to you, but there is one more that I wanted to hit.
Sure.
And is Kevin ever going to be allowed back on the show?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so Kevin has a better chance of being let back on the show than Nindo does. But
can you remind me what Nindo did? Because I can't remember.
Well, it wasn't one thing. Basically, what ended up happening was he called in a bunch of times about different subjects in a way that wasn't facilitating an ongoing conversation like we like to have on Talk Cuban. And then the last time that he was allowed on, he ended up going into this like political sex and gender type rant that, you know, wasn't really A, what we talk about on Talk Heathen, or B, indicative of a productive conversation either way. So we let him go. And then he just started calling into the show under different names, under different numbers. And we were like, okay, well, now you forfeit the right to be on the show again if you're going to lie to our call screeners and try and trick us into talking to you. Because, I mean, we've been accused on Talk Heathen of having people call on and pretend to be theists, or like contracting actors to pretend to be the different people on the phone. And that's simply not the case. These people are real, and we prioritize honesty. We prioritize earnest conversation and honest interlocution. And Nindo just wasn't going to be providing that, so we let him go. But to answer your question, if Kevin comes back and he says, you know what, I took a better look at the Planet X theory, or the theory about the soul being connected to the pineal gland, or the fact that wormwood is actually a planet, or any of the various things that he's come at us with, and if he comes back and he says, you know what, I don't believe that anymore, here's how I figured that out, help me deconstruct this, then by all means we'll have Kevin back on the show. But he needs to exhibit a willingness to continue to learn in order to do so.
Yeah, yesterday, because I was thinking I was going to bring Kevin up at the end if we run out of talking points, I just did a quick Google on Planet X, and it led me straight away to this YouTube channel from this person called Claudia Albers, and it is full of the most batshit theories I've ever come across in my life.
Yes.
And how somebody can be, this woman claims to be a scientist, and she may actually be, but nothing on her YouTube channel is in any way scientific. Mm-hmm. Because you can see how often she's putting these videos out, and she's obviously researching things for all of 10 minutes. And it's
yeah. Eric did a really good breakdown of kind of the history of Planet X and kind of how that conspiracy theory changed and morphed into what Kevin was talking about on his show, Murphy's Law. But Kevin actually gave me a really great gift. And that was that during a lot of our calls, I would end by saying, hey, Kevin, do better research, right? Research these things and research a little bit and then get back to us. And enough people in the comments were like, people don't know how to research well. People think that if it's on the internet, then it's a legitimate source. People think that if it's in a book, then they can believe it. It's not good information. It's not a good suggestion to just tell someone like Kevin, go research, because they're not going to know how to do that. And I took that to heart. I really did. I realized that was pretty accurate. And I was making the assumption that everybody else had the ability to research in the same way that I did. I paid $50,000 for a journalism degree. So I probably have a different take on how to research than, the average person. So I actually started my own channel, and I'm focusing exactly on that, exactly on the idea of how do you research? How do you determine what's a good source? How do you determine who's biased and in what direction? And how do you compensate for that? And all of these like critical thinking techniques that will help people to be better online learners.
Yeah, I actually did a course on that once. I went to well, I was at a conference, and there was one guy who did a session, a couple of hour session on how to research better, and he used the Iran Contra as an example, and he got everybody to Google Iran Contra, and if you did that, you got everything just from one side, because the other side didn't call it Iran Contra. Right. So then he told us some different searches to do, and then you got much more balanced view. It was quite interesting.
Oh yes, it's all about what you type into that search bar. And it's a really interesting new way of looking at the world through search terms, which is definitely something we'll be covering.
Yes. Anyway, Kevin, he's entertaining, shall we say, when he's on. He's not one of the ones that makes my eyes roll when he comes on. A guy who makes my eyes roll is Father John.
Oh, interesting. Because I find that exactly opposite. I'm amused by Kevin, but Father John is interesting to me. But probably just because I'm a church history geek and I enjoy that aspect of it. So
yeah. So I have come to the end of my talking points. So probably this is a good place to finish our discussion. Thank you so much for coming on. I am a huge fan. I without wanting to upset Jamie, if he ever watches this, I think the Talk Heathen has actually become better since you started co-hosting.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's going to be my 1 year anniversary on Talk Heathen this coming Sunday. I will have been for a whole year. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. But I used to love it anyway. I've watched every single episode, and I used to love it anyway. But I actually think that you being on has actually made it better. And I've enjoyed the ones that you've obviously where you've been the hosts, because I like Neil a lot. Neil is somebody I find I can talk to for hours on end.
Oh yes.
And he was on the other day, and seriously, we could have talked for hours and hours and hours. And unfortunately, I had to be somewhere, and I had to cut it short. So hopefully, I'll have a talk to Neil again. So that was a great episode. I really enjoyed that with Neil on. And
Neil was awesome.
Yeah, and I think all the co-hosts that you've had, people like Dave Warnock and people like that, they're all really great people. So I enjoy the show a lot. And
that's so good.
I was nervous to talk to you today, but I've calmed down now. When you first came on, I was like, "Oh no,
I'm not so scary."
yeah, I was totally fanning out. I was like, oh. But yeah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's been an absolute blast, and yeah, thank you.